So the second keynote speaker will be Ms. Nadine Umutoni, Project Coordinator at the African Organization for Standardization, ASO, and Coordinator of the Pan-African Quality Infrastructure, PAC Secretariat. In the meantime, I'm going to call the panelists so that they can join me in front here as we get the presentation. The first panelist is Dr. Amare Ayalu, Program Manager of the Partnership for Control of Aflatoxin in Africa at the African Union Commission. A round of applause for Dr. Amare. The second panelist is Dr. Hakim Mufumbiro, Coordinator for Codex Committee for Africa. The third panelist is Ms. Kefirwe Mwalosi, Senior Nutrition and Food Safety Officer at AUDA-NEPAD. The fourth is Mr. Watipanso Mkandawire, Senior Expert, Private Sector Development and Food Trade at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. The last but not the least is Dr. John Mkuka, Chief Executive Officer of the Alliance for Commodity Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa, ACTESA COMESA. Just a minute, let us deal with the issue. Delegates, as we are dealing with those technical issues, we invite Ms. Nadine Umutoni to make her presentation so that we save on time. Ms. Nadine, please. Please, let's give her a round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, moderator, for giving me the floor. My name's Nadine Umutoni, working with the African Organization for Standardization, ARSO, and I'm sure you remember that the Secretary General was the panel during the opening, a session after the opening. And you know very much what ARSO is. Before they project my presentation, I can just talk about ARSO. What ARSO is an intergovernmental organization. Maybe they can continue to slide 2. It is an intergovernmental organization which was established by the Organization of African Unity, which is now African Union today. Together with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. It was in 1977, and you can be surprised, some of you, you have heard about ARSO today, but we are old enough to be known. So without any further delay, ARSO deals with standards. We provide standards. Maybe go to next slide. We continue to the next slides. I want to just keep the unnecessary slide to save on time. Okay, this is now what I was saying about ARSO and what we do. We have a mandate to deliver standards for different sectors of this life, including agriculture. So we also deliver conformity assessment procedures to help and facilitate industries to be competitive globally and internally at Africa. Next slide. Yeah, now without losing time, the mandate of ARSO, as I have just said, it also includes some research, capacity building, and awareness creation, expertise exchange, and all those. So there is a mandate now we have been given by the AFCFTA agreement, especially in its protocol on trading goods, at Annex 6 on technical barriers to trade, and Annex 7 on sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So we also, together with other sister institutions on quality infrastructure in Africa, we always look how to comply with these AFCFTA agreement requirements. We started by elaborating or doing a gap analysis in terms of quality infrastructure in the continent, looking how developed our countries are in terms of standardization, accreditation, metrology. And we found that few countries are developed. There is a lot to be done. And you can see that the assessment, we have done 4 assessments already. And with the one we did during the COVID in 2020, we found that only 48% of the African countries are able to comply with the requirements of the TBT Annex. And now we have improved in 2023. The document we published in this year in October is showing that there is a good improvement of 10%. Those countries are now at least able to comply with the annex, but we still have some way to go. Next slide. This one, we have now, apart from doing the gap analysis, which is informing all the stakeholders on where to invest their efforts, we are also have set our strategy at ARSO. We every 5 years set next slide. We set our strategy. We have some targets to reach, but now we are focusing for these 5 years. We are focusing on quality culture. So that industries, every actors in this economy has opportunity to reach to its target. So we are also creating value for African standards. So many people don't know why, or they don't understand why we have African standards, why there are international standards, national standards, regional standards, but we always aim at creating that value so that they understand the importance of applying African standards. So we also create we improve the ARSO sustainability so that we continue providing support that is needed. Next slide. Now this is now our work in standard harmonization. We specifically we focus on agriculture, but generally we have 4 committees, technical committees, project committees, special working groups. But in agriculture, you can see the percentage. We have 25 technical committees working around agriculture sector. We have already published 315 standards in agriculture. And these standards are there for adoption, for implementation. This mainly are in meat, standard for eggs, cereals, good agriculture practice, African eco-labeling standards. These are sustainability standard, good manufacturing, packaging, and labeling. These are published, and member states are adopting the standards free of charge. We are planning to also harmonize for 440, but you know, as you well know, standards are very technical. So we always produce documents that simplify the technical language of standards, and we distribute them to the member states for farmers. Any farmer, even if he didn't go to school, can use the outreach materials and understand what the standards say. Next slide. These are the committees. I will not go through them, but what I want to say about the committees is that everyone is invited to take part in these committees. This is only for the agriculture part. You know, when you participate in a TC, you are able to influence the content of the standards, meaning you are now able to trade once the standard is approved, adopted, and implemented in all the countries. Now, on food nutrition aspects in our standards, you will find that these categories, 4 categories of standards, all have some aspects of nutrition. You can see that, for example, in product standards, we have the requirements on the composition of a product. We have some requirements on food additive, contaminants such as heavy metals, and requirements on packaging, all those for the consumer to be safe. You will see even in agriculture, good agriculture practice, even in sustainability, all of them have some safety issues that contribute to a good product to consume. Next slide. Okay, this is now how the standard African standard are acceptable or accepted at continental level, even at international level. First of all, we at ARSO, it's not the secretariat, but ARSO means its member states. Now we are collaborating with RECs, regional economic communities, who oversee all the work of the standardization process. They are the ones approving the standards that are to be published. And before setting up a technical committee, we align it with what we have at international level, because in all the harmonization work, we need references, and those references should be from international. So that's why we always look into what we have at international level, ISO level, Codex level, so that we can set up a TC. Recently, we did a study on adoption of African standards among the ARSO member states. And the results that have shown us that just a few member states have adopted. But what I can say is that not all of them have responded to the survey. I know some of those who have not responded have also adopted, such as Zimbabwe, and others in Ethiopia. They have adopted a quite number. It's only that responsiveness is a very big problem in Africa, and because maybe you have so many things to respond to, but these surveys informs the decision making. Now we can see the recognition. We are recognized by ISO because we promote their standards. We always recommend the ISO standards, even other international standards, for adoption once they have been analyzed and confirmed suitable for Africa. Apart from standardization, we do conformity assessment. We have a conformity assessment committee which produces conformity assessment procedures and policies. And if you can go to next slide, you will see that it has developed a conformity assessment program, which has these are the rules that we have. We have the rules for certification bodies, for testing. We have the rules for sectors such as sustainable agriculture, marine culture, even pharmaceutical, including African traditional medicine. Go to next slide. These are the schemes, and I highlighted this one because this one is a bit known by Africa. We have created through the CACO, created 9 schemes. 2 more are coming very soon. So this African EcoMark sustainability and eco-labeling, it's a scheme that is given to a farm, a company, a producer who is complying with African eco-labeling sustainability, which looks into social aspect, economic and environmental, to produce safe food. You can continue. Then who is benefiting from this certification scheme? we can have if a single farmer entity can apply for this scheme and be certified, or a group of farms. To minimize the cost, a group of farms put their effort together, their resources together, and they conform with the standards, then they apply for this scheme. So we have already certified a good number of farms. We have trained farms in Zambia, Kenya, Cameroon, Ghana, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Uganda, Nigeria, and Senegal. And now we have also given certificate to 11 farms, companies working around agriculture, tilapia, aquaculture, tilapia, and the catfish. So we have a list, and we are still continuing getting support to support farmers and SMEs. So this is an example of how the standards are linked to the CAADP and intra-Africa trade. The Secretary General in the beginning, he gave this example on the cassava. It's a project which combines all the quality infrastructure aspects in Africa. We have done the first part, which was this a gap analysis, showing us where the gaps are in terms of standards, in terms of accreditation, certification, in terms of laboratories, and even in terms of machineries to facilitate the cassava. So we are in phase 2, where 45 product standards are being harmonized for the cassava. We have trained on the proficiency testing, especially on protein, in moisture content, and nutrition and toxic metals. We have also harmonized 7 standards for electrotechnical. These are trailer and mills, rotating machines, refrigeration, and thanks to Zambia, who gave us the standards to base on harmonization. So we have another one. These are examples. We have so many, but these are examples. And the insects, we know that so many Africans don't eat insects, but those who eat insects know how nutritious they are. Now we are developing standards, and this one is about the consumer education. Sometimes our consumers are quiet, or they are not aware of quality issues or nutrition content of the product. Now we continue educating them what to look when they are going to purchase a product, especially a food product. In the beginning, people have been saying, even the videos about the obesity in adults, because so many people don't know what to look when they are eating food, the fat, sugar content, and all those. So we produce these documents to facilitate the consumer to know what to look for. Next slide. This is now about cooperation. We cooperate with so many. We have more than 80 MOUs, but these ones, I put them because of their roles in improving nutrition and food safety. So we have now got an MOU with ISO. ISO, we used to suffer a lot at ARSO because we used to buy ISO standards to be referenced in our standards. We used to spend more than $100,000 per year on ISO standard, but now we have got good collaboration. We are now able to get the ISO standard for free and adopt them as African standards. So even the Codex and all those partners. This is a conclusion, sort of recommendation. We urge all the member states, even non-members of ARSO, to adopt African standards because there is more benefits. As I said, the standards are aligned with what exists at Codex, at ISO, and they have in them an African situation. So this is a unique case, and we urge all member states to adopt. And also we urge the African Union to adopt a good cooperation in technical regulation. We have a draft which we submitted to the African Union on a continental technical regulatory framework. And we urge everyone to promote quality culture from grassroots level and up to the policymaking level. So we also urge the financial institutions to invest in agribusiness, in agri-processing, and also in conformity assessment by helping the establishment of laboratories, and which will help to reduce the cost of compliance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Ms. Nadine. Okay, so we've heard of what ASO is doing in terms of development of standards. And I think in particular, she talked about the issue of insects. We eat a lot of insects in most of our African countries. And we realize that some of these that we do not have standards for them. When we talk about intra-African trade, we could trade in these protein-rich substances, but then we need to have standards for them. So I think that is food for thought as we sit in this meeting. At this point, I'm sure the technical issues have been sorted out. We're going to listen to the pre-recorded presentation from Diana. Thank you.
Production. Again, trading in agricultural commodities within the AfCFTA framework, trading in agricultural commodities is activated through the Protocol on Trade in Goods with its various annexes. We have a total of 9 annexes under that protocol. For example, you have the annex on market access, rules of origin, trade remedies, technical barriers to trade, and SPS, among other annexes. So these annexes seek just to enhance market transparency and predictability in trading in Africa for agricultural products. We know that predictability is very important in trade. Once you know what to expect in a particular market, you are able to prepare and to trade according to what is available in the counterpart market. So, for example, here I just show you that we have been moving with the different annexes. For example, the annex on SPS has been approved. The work program is huge. It has been approved by the AF subcommittee on SPS, and it's now ready for implementation. It was approved about 3 weeks ago. So in terms of the CAADP and the AfCFTA interface, we must accept that the intricacies of the interlinkages between trade and food and nutrition security do exist, and that these interlinkages show that the strength that can be seen in one sector can benefit another sector. Without a doubt, the trade sector cannot thrive if the agriculture is not robust within Africa. Likewise, agriculture sector cannot be productive when there is inadequate uptake of what is being generated by the trade sector. So we therefore need for consumers to access food commodities from where they are in excess supply. We should be able to move commodities from one area to the other to meet the demands available. Now, continuing, still with the interface between CAADP and the AfCFTA, free trade really presents consumer with different food product options, and this they can use to improve their nutrition. And trade can also have unintended effects on consumer diets and health. We have also this FAO published in 2019, I think, that there is need to link food system, food environments, and diets, because if we don't do that, we are beginning to see the ironic development that whereas within the continent we lack food, we have insufficient food, we at the same time are seeing increase in obesity. And food safety also plays a very fundamental link to food security and nutrition. We have also been presented with the daunting high amount of death within the continent. I'm not going to get into that. Probably you will be presented with those statistics, but food safety has become very key a key consideration and a precondition to export markets, and can determine whether you will be able to access a market or not. So if you don't have produced food that is safe, your products become very uncompetitive. And it will continue to influence trade as Africa moves ahead with its continental integration agenda. So if food safety issues are not adequately addressed, the CAADP Malabo Declaration on Ending Hunger, Halving Poverty, and Tripling Intra-Africa Trade in Agricultural Commodities and Services by 2025 will not be met, because we say that, and it's true, that food that is not safe is not food at all. You will also see a very interesting development that the food safety landscape has expanded over the years because of ease in transportation. Food can now travel several miles and can be consumed in a different part of the region or a different part of the world. And so with that long movement of food, there can easily be a problem in terms of crossing borders, and also having longer food supply chains can lead to food contamination. We need to really look into how food that is transported into further markets are handled to ensure that it's really safe for consumption. So food that meets safety and quality standards is often exported in Africa, but when it comes to the food that is consumed in the local market, not too much attention is paid on that. And yet we are talking about improving nutrition in Africa here. So that is also another area we need to pay attention to. Now, CAADP and the AfCFTA interface is therefore very mutually beneficial, in the sense that these continental projects truly reinforce each other. And if you look at how CAADP is implemented, it prioritizes performance-based approaches that are underpinned by supportive national policies so that they can enhance food security, ensure sustainable production, induce agricultural innovation, and improve farmers' livelihoods. And in the same vein, the AfCFTA takes a similar approach, and the agreement seeks to boost regional trade for agricultural commodities, increasing local processing of key agricultural products, and reducing food imports. So, but we have to be mindful that whereas these objectives are clear, there could be barriers to AfCFTA implementation. The AfCFTA presents a great opportunity for expanding Africa's food basket through regional trade, but standards, regulations, and SPS measures are amongst the important types of trade-related measures used around the world to regulate trade. I know that my colleague Nadine will talk about standards, but in terms of SPS measures are really put in place by government to ensure that their populations are protected. But it's only the way in which SPS measures are implemented that can sometimes cause disruption in trade. But the measures in themselves are not a problem. So countries maintain standards and SPS measures to ensure that food is safe for consumption and to prevent the spread of pests or diseases amongst animals and plants. Some of the standards and measures are restrictive and limit the smooth flow and trade in agricultural commodities. That's why harmonization of both standards and SPS measures are very key for the success or for the realization of the AfCFTA objectives. I will only say here that we must ensure that there is diligence in how countries come up with standards, in supporting countries to come up with standards, as well as in how they develop or articulate their SPS measures, so that they do not disrupt trade. In this slide, I will talk about the CAADP target for trade in Africa. We see that the CAADP target for boosting intra-Africa trade is to triple intra-Africa trade in agricultural commodities and services by 2025. So member states committed to 3 performance areas in their effort to achieve this. The first area was to increase the value of intra-Africa trade in agricultural commodities and services by 200% by 2025. And this compared to a baseline established in 2015. The second target was to create an enabling environment for intra-Africa trade in agricultural commodities and services by improving the trade policy and institutional environment. The third target was introduced in 2023, where we are now seeking to fast-track and fast-track the implementation of the AfCFTA since the official trade started in January, under the AfCFTA agreement started in January 2021. So I think we have also been presented with the fourth BR report, but I just wanted to reflect on what has happened in terms of achieving these targets. In 2027, only 3 countries were on track. In 2019, only 7 countries were on track. The number had increased from 3 to 7 from 2017 rather. And in 2021, the number dropped, I think, because of the effect of COVID-19. We only had again 3 of the countries dropped out of that statistics. But in 2023, no country was on track in achieving the overall target on boosting intra-Africa trade. And also, without a doubt, this now became the fourth CAADP BR was the worst recorded in terms of meeting this target. However, Rwanda, Zambia, and Zimbabwe were on course to doubling their trade with other countries within the continent. On the other hand, when we look at the AfCFTA implementation tool, the Secretariat has put in place several tools for implementation of the AfCFTA, one of which is the Guided Trade Initiative, the e-tariff book, Rules of Origin Manual, the Pan-African Payment System. We also have forums for bringing stakeholders together. We had the first AfCFTA Business Forum, and then we have the AfCFTA non-tariff barriers online mechanism. I will just speak about the online mechanism and just say that it's a mechanism put in place to help the economic operators to identify, report, and monitor resolution of NTBs. It's a very helpful tool. We are getting so many reports from economic operators. I just want to touch on the Guided Trade Initiative, which was launched in 2022, where 7 countries participated just to kickstart meaningful trade under the AfCFTA regime. So Guided Trade Initiative will continue to support and consolidate trade among countries, economic operators rather, and to date we have 31 state parties who have signaled the desire to be part of the Guided Trade Initiative. The GTI objectives are fourfold. One is to demonstrate that the legal framework of the AfCFTA is ready to serve Africa, and also to get feedback from the participating countries on how what can be done, the gaps, and where we can, focus our efforts, and also to test the readiness of the private sector to participate in trade under the AfCFTA. As we are aware, trading is principally done by the private sector. The last objective was to identify possible future intervention areas and to increase intra-Africa trade and maximize the benefits of the AfCFTA. So a number of products were traded, and most of them were agricultural commodities. Again, speaking to the fact that we really need to harness the interlinkages between CAADP and AfCFTA. The GTI has been able to provide us with very many lessons and how we can continue, improve while we continue implementing the agreement. One of which is that there is the need to establish the AfCFTA trading company. The AfCFTA is also, Secretariat is also implementing the private sector engagement strategy. This strategy identifies initial 4 priority areas, and agro-processing is one of them. And we are putting in all the efforts to ensure that we support the development of agro-processing value chains to increase intra-Africa trade, production, employment, and enhance food security. Now, in terms of my concluding thoughts, I think, which I said in the beginning, that can be picked as some of the, to constitute some of the call from this meeting, are that the establishment of the AfCFTA market must be supported by a strong industrialization drive, so that we are able to meet the supply side constraints as well as accelerate economic growth. There is also need to focus on to pay attention to industrialization, so that we are able to provide meaningful traction to the agricultural transformation drive. The AfCFTA agreement also gives us a great opportunity for enhancing domestic manufacturing, and also for prioritizing value addition and development of regional value chains. It's very crucial that, and we must harness all this. The role of the private sector in taking center stage to deliver on Africa's economic growth goals are also very crucial. We need to ensure that we hold the hands of the private sector in this journey. The public sector must therefore continue to provide the right policy environment so that the private sector can thrive in this environment. And then I will not belabor that. We need to harmonize standards, regulation, and then industrialization and trade potential of the AfCFTA cannot be realized if we don't have quality infrastructure. And again, for the agriculture sector, we need to ensure that we have robust rural infrastructure. We all know that there is inadequate mechanization. We need irrigation systems. We need laboratories, as well as storage facilities to reduce post-harvest losses. This is the last concluding thoughts. There is need to also make use of all the digital tools that are available. We are talking about climate change. We need to really deliberately focus on the effect of climate change and or the relationship between the climate change and SPS measures. And there is need to build capacity on using good regulatory practice. With good regulatory practice, we can be sure that we will be able to reduce all the SPS related costs that traders incur in the process of trading. And again, once countries can implement good regulatory practices, it will be efficient to trade within the free trade area that has been established. So I would like to end here and thank you and wish you very good deliberations during this event. I'm very sorry I'm not able to stay with you online to take some of the questions, but I really wish you a fruitful deliberation, and I'm sure Nadine will be able to respond to some of these things. Thank you very much.
to answer your question, Doreen, I think best would be to give examples of what the African Union, when I say African Union, African Union Commission and African Union Development Agency, AUDA NEPAD, have done in terms of food safety, which are relevant for this discussion. So I will give you 4 examples. The first one is the food safety metric in the biennial review. After the first biennial review, the African Union Commission and NEPAD realized that food safety was not captured adequately. So we came up with a composite index, what we call Africa Food Safety Index, which has been embedded in the biennial review since the second biennial review, and on which member states have generated and submitted data during the second and third biennial review. This index has been emulated to develop global food safety indicators by UN agencies, specifically the WHO. As many of you know, we don't have also food safety indicators in the SDGs. And so there is an attempt to develop food safety indicators at global level based on the Africa Food Safety Index. Still related to data, the African Union is developing also a food safety data hub for the continent. We recognize that the biennial review data will not be adequate for risk assessment. And we have to do risk assessment in food safety if we want to prioritize issues and we want to allocate our meager resources where it matters the most. There are many other benefits of food safety risk assessment, of course. So for this, before the end of the year, the African Union expects to complete the data architecture, the data priority, data sourcing, data sharing protocol, and also sustainability approaches for the food safety data hub, as well as a digital platform. So in the coming years, as of next year, we look forward to working with many of you to build capacity in data generation and data use so that this food safety data hub becomes operational. Coming to specifically the issue of aflatoxins, Doreen, several speakers since Monday in the plenary, as well as also during the side event yesterday on value chains, raised the problem of aflatoxins. African Union has a priority attention to aflatoxin control, and it has established the Partnership for Aflatoxin Control in Africa, PACA. By the way, PACA was born in a CAADP partnership platform meeting in 2011. And then it was endorsed by policymakers and launched by the African Union Commission the following year. So I could say a lot about the learnings and experiences from the implementation of PACA that are relevant to this discussion, but I'll try to pick only a couple or maybe three areas. One of the things is you will be surprised by how inadequate the evidence out there is. When you look at operational evidence that countries can implement, for example, in one of my focus countries in Nigeria, for example, when they need information on how bad the liver cancer situation is, what that is costing, how much that is costing Nigeria, or how much is the cost of control, we didn't have that kind of information. So we launched what we called country situational analysis. And also, I think what is more interesting for this platform is, based on the evidence we generated, we helped the countries to come up with country plans, which they were mainstreaming into CAADP NIPES. A very good example of this is in Tanzania, they managed to generate evidence to develop a country plan and then to mainstream in the NIPE. And based on that, we supported them to develop what we call TANIPAC, a huge project for implementing the national plan. And as you know, GAPSIP supports CAADP compliant projects because the National Aflatoxin Control Plan was part of the National Investment Plan. Tanzania managed to of course, to be eligible to a GovSIP funding. And currently, they are implementing a $35.5 million project to implement the national plan. So maybe I will wrap up, but let me add a few more points. The other thing is, in this PACA journey, we have worked very closely with AUD and NEPAD. So since the beginning, in our country launch, in our roundtable meetings, NEPAD was with us from the beginning. I think maybe last point in terms of institutionalization of food safety at a continental level, I think one thing worth mentioning is, based on years of stakeholder consultations and scoping studies, the African Union Commission is working to establish an African Union Food Safety Agency. So this agency was announced by the chairperson of the Commission during the first FAO, WHO, and African Union International Food Safety Conference in 2019. So a lot has happened since then. And currently the Commission is working on last mile policy organ decisions and processes to make this food safety agency happen. I think related to this, Doreen, allow me to mention the work we're doing to establish a forum. You were also part of it, Doreen, in Cairo when we launched the Africa Food Regulatory Authority Forum to try and promote experience learning, sharing, build capacity, and promote modernization and harmonization of food regulation in the continent. At the end, we have to really build a level playing field if we are to boost trade through our regulations. So let me stop here. I could have said a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mari. He has a lot to share with us, but the panelists here only have 5 minutes because we want to leave room for the audience to interact. The 5 minutes is not for everyone, but it's 5 minutes each. So turning to you, Ms. Kefilwe. Dr. Mari has talked about how AU PACA is working with your institution, AUD and NEPAD, on various food safety issues. Will you please tell us more about what he just explained to the delegates?
Bonjour à tous. Thank you, Madam Moderator Doreen. I think Dr. Amar has said a lot about PACA. When PACA was being piloted, AUD and NEPAD was actually providing technical support to PACA in 6 countries that were piloted, that is Nigeria, Tanzania, the Gambia, Senegal, Malawi, and of course, Uganda. Yeah. So that was actually a very success for us to ensure that food safety is actually being mainstream also into the CAADP processes. But not forgetting that the journey for us as nutrition community, we started in 2011 when we gave birth to CAADP Nutrition Initiative, and many partners that are here present actually provided support, not just technical, but also financial support to AUD and NEPAD to ensure that nutrition is not left behind when you talk about CAADP processes. The likes of William from USAID that is here present, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the USAID, and the UN family that actually gave support to ensure that we train or build capacity in 49 countries. And that started in Southern Africa community in 2013. We also moved to Senegal for ECOWAS and Central Africa member states, the North Africa community. So 49 countries were trained to build capacity to improve the policy formulation on CAADP in terms of nutrition, also in terms of programming around nutrition. So recently, through the support of JICA and IFNA, we had a meeting with the SADC member states where we're trying to actually develop SADC food fortification standards, because that is actually being built on what NEPAD has done in terms of developing guidelines for harmonizing food standards. And we are really happy to see that some of the RECs that are here present are also leveraging on the existing platforms that most of us are doing. And not forgetting that FAO, for example, have also done incredible work in terms of food safety risk assessment, of which also NEPAD is actually working with the FAO WFP to ensure that this is also infused in terms of the existing program, such as the home grown school feeding program. We start with the farmers. Do they understand what food safety means? Do they have traceability systems in place? because don't forget that, like we mentioned, unsafe food is not food. So we have to make sure that our children also consume food that are nutritious, also of high quality. So World Food Program also have a community working on food safety. For example, in Ghana this year in June, we convened food safety stakeholders that WFP organized, where we ensure that we share issues around food safety. How do we improve the policies and frameworks around food safety in Africa? I think maybe I'll stop there, but also to wrap up to say that we need to ensure that when we trade, we ensure that we have the systems in place to ensure that Africa is not a dumping ground when it comes to issues of food. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Malosi. We had the first presentation where we talked about ASO and the standards that have been developed for various food commodities. There were about 35 standards under agricultural commodities. Dr. Hakeem Mfumbiro, you are the coordinator for Codex Committee for Africa. That is also a WHO FAO body responsible for food standards. I think it would be good if the audience could understand how Codex links with ASO and what role Codex plays in the issues of standardization, where nutrition and safety comes in.
Thank you very much, Doreen, and good morning, delegates. Glad to be here. I think this is my first partnership platform, so I'm extremely happy to participate in this engagement. On the broad perspective, Codex is about good food for everyone, everywhere. That is the main aspect regarding Codex. Has been around for 60 years. We're celebrating 60 years this year. And you're all invited in Rome in 3 weeks' time for the grand celebrations as Codex marks 60 years of a good marriage between FAO and WHO. With regard to our engagement with the other standard setting organizations like ARSO, the main objective with the harmonization of standards is that we are all interested in the same objective, in having standards that are reflective of the current situations and those that are able to actually support trade. What we have been doing currently with the African Organization of Standardization is that we have been collaborating a lot with the priorities that are in Africa, as well as the priorities that come through the member states through the ALSO system. So we don't, for example, develop standards for which already existing African standards have been developed, because that will be duplicative. And what we have been focusing on, as I'll use an example, in the Codex Committee for Africa, have been general cross-cutting standards that are important for the member states. For example, to build and enhance their food control systems, using the example of the recently developed guideline for developing, for supporting member states in developing harmonized food safety systems. We believe that through stronger national systems is the only way the region would actually be able to meet the commitments and objectives that have been set out. But additionally, we also support development of regional standards for Africa for commodities that are exclusively traded in Africa. Although it's not very easy to say that they're actually exclusively traded in Africa because trade is generally global. And you can't easily put a figure and indicate that these are only products traded in Africa. But we have done several products, for example, that are predominantly traded in Africa. For example, shea butter, cassava products, and related commodities. And with this, we are able to support the effective implementation of the AfCFTA and ultimately meet the objectives that have been set and the commitments within the broader CAADP and what we focus on as the Codex Coordinating Committee for Africa is to put together the members, understand the priorities, provide regional standards which meet those priorities, and as well ensure that the members are effectively participating in the broader Codex as an international standards setting organization, because you will not run away from the Codex standards as they are the authority within the WTO SPS agreement. And without those, you will actually not even be able to trade as effectively and freely and smoothly as possible. So we are happy that most of the members in the region have taken up this role. We did a scorecard last year, 2022, to understand the kind of adoption of the standards for the Codex members that have membership in Codex, and the results indicate that probably around close to 40% of the members have adopted a number of Codex standards, and the same number are effectively participating in Codex work, which is probably around 25 or so countries out of the 55 AU member states. So, but we have a bigger role to play, because without holding the other countries, we'll actually not even be able to meet the objectives that we're looking for. And we're doing this by supporting, for example, recently, last year and this year, for some of the countries that want to understand their food control systems, we have piloted the food control systems assessment for the countries to identify what are their priorities and trigger their governments to be able to invest in the actual gaps that exist at the national level with regard to food control systems. And this has been piloted in 10 countries. We are hoping that we will be able to roll over to the other countries probably next year. So as Codex, as a family, we think that the outputs from the Codex system contribute significantly to meeting the objectives that Diana talked about for trade, because without standards, it's not possible that we'll actually be able to meet the trade targets that are there. And without harmonized standards, it will actually even be more difficult. So I believe that is the kind of message that we want to put across, that the members need to embrace regional and international harmonized standards, as this is the only way we will actually be able to unlock the potential that exists in expanding our intra-Africa trade in the region, and ultimately ensuring that the health and safety of the consumers is heavily protected in the continent. So I believe this, by meeting these obligations, we will be able to achieve the commitments that the members have set out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hakim. Now, allow me to turn to Mr. Watipaso Mukandawire. You're a senior expert for private sector development and food trade at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. We understand the role the private sector plays in issues of food trade. Tell us how your organization is involved in ensuring that we achieve the tripling of intra-African trade in agricultural commodities and nutrition improvement. In 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doreen. Good morning. And I've already been introduced, so I'll go straight to the question. I think, I don't know whether everyone knows FCDO. I was asked a couple of questions yesterday because they didn't know. FCDO is a merger between DFID and Foreign Commonwealth Office. We are one institution now, so that's why it's called FCDO. Now, I think the points that have been mentioned by both FCTA Secretariat, ASO, and others are relevant, and we know we are, as FCDO, in the right space in terms of supporting intra-Africa trade to meet some of the Malabo commitments of growing intra-Africa trade. Currently, I'll give just 2 examples of where we are supporting. We are supporting the AFCT Secretariat in terms of implementation of this agreement. And we are also partnering and supporting AGRA to try to push the regional food trade agenda. Now, I'll give two examples of our partnership with AGRA because they're very relevant on the practicality of some of the so many regulations, frameworks that have been formulated or approved. A good example is the SPS Annex, which has just been approved. That's music to everyone else. The challenge, of course, will always be implementation on the ground. How do we do it so that it starts working and increasing the trade that we want in the various commodities? So, two examples. One, with AGRA, we are supporting COMESA to come up with a mutual recognition framework for specifically 6 countries who have signed to it. These countries are Zambia, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda. Currently, the project is being, of course, coordinated by COMESA to ensure that eventually we have a bilateral agreed mutual recognition agreements which can be implemented, because we realize that when you're trying to deal with the SPS measures, certification is always a difficult issue. And this increases cost because even if your country X issues its certificate of compliance, country where the product is going will not accept that certificate. So how do countries mutually accept each other's certification? It means the proficiency test has to be agreed to. It means you have to audit the other institutions. So this is the implementation framework that we're trying to create and support those institutions in the 6 countries to come up eventually with the bilateral agreements which will make the mutual recognition framework work. So that's one example. The second example we are implementing with AGRA is a program that we carried out in Tanzania, Kenya, and Uganda, all to try to increase our regional trade amongst those 3 countries in food. And this was to do with improving compliance with the maize quality along the trading routes using a structured trade approach. We co-partnered with East Africa Grain Council as well as the Uganda Grain Council to implement on the ground. They targeted private companies that are supplying in the region, the aggregators who are aggregating maize from the farmers, and some of the farmer groups that are supplying to those aggregators. It's amazing when you just put a little bit of money to try to see how partners can improve compliance. Because what we found out initially was, one, there was low compliance of the East Africa grain standards of actual maize. Secondly, very little awareness about the food safety issues. That's why you see most of the maize is dried along the roadside or on the ground and with a lot of contamination happening. Thirdly, there's a lot of high costs of trying to comply. And this was one of the most difficult issues to deal with because, one, if you invest in compliance, but you find that your products can still be picked up in the informal trade of people who don't recognize, who don't care about the aflatoxin levels. So how do you give incentives for aggregators or the farmers to invest in high quality and safe food to make sure that there's a reduction in aflatoxin? So we invested in those 2 institutions who worked with over 10,000 farmers and with over 36 off-takers who have been trading within the East Africa region. The results are very encouraging. I think there's still a lot of things to be done. There has been in the sample that we're working on already 50% reduction in rejection rates, which is very encouraging. There's a lot of behavioral change amongst the farmers. We went to a number of areas in Soroti, in Uganda, especially where aflatoxin levels were known So the point that I'm trying to make in concluding remarks, since I've run out of time, is that the issue of implementation is so important, and we have to work with institutions on the ground to ensure that this compliance, there's an incentive to for the compliance, but there's also realization that some of these have to be public resources, especially when it comes to behavioral change of some of the actors along the value chain. Thank you, Doreen. Sorry, I took a little bit more time.
Thank you, Mr. Mkandawire. Last but not the least, again, Dr. John Mkuka, Chief Executive Officer, Alliance for Commodity Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa, ACTESA, who would like to understand what ACTESA does and how it contributes to achievement of the Malabo commitments in 5 minutes, so that the audience seems a little more interested in asking us questions. I wish I was on the other side, because I have so many questions as well, but I can't ask them. 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, moderator and delegates. My institution, the Alliance for Commodity Trade in Eastern and Southern Africa, ACTESA, it implements Pillar 2 and 3 of CAADP on market access and food security. What we do is work with the private sector in implementing the harmonization of standards, and we'll make sure that also we support the countries in terms of domesticating what has been harmonized, and also making sure that the instruments, the standard operation, protocols are utilized, between the countries. I'll give you an example of one program where I've been involved the last 13 years on the COMESA seed trade harmonization regulations. The strategy that we did as ACTESA was first to make sure that when you're harmonizing these standards, you have to make sure you work with the private sector right from the beginning. This helps because both the private sector and the regulators, who are the public officials, they are making agreement together. Then the other thing that we did as ACTESA is to make sure that the labeling, which we should accompany seeds that have been traded between the COMESA countries, the labeling is put in place, because if it's not coordinated by an institution like ACTESA, then nothing will happen. So what happened is that when you supported the labeling system, the coordination system, but now things are moving. And this now will be a precursor for the Africa Coordinated Free Trade Area, because they do not need to reinvent the wheel. All they need to use is what COMESA has done on the seed harmonization, because for seed to move between the countries, we have to deal with issues of SPS, because the SPS issues have to be agreed. I remember we had agreed about 69 quarantine pests, at that time. Then also you have to make sure that the support of the whole process is done. And so our institution of ACTESA also wants to make sure that the issues of aflatoxins, the harmonization of bioprotectants, harmonization for you to support. This is just to do with the inputs, because for you to increase agricultural productivity, access, affordability, availability of inputs, seeds, fertilizer, and other inputs like bioprotectants, and needs to be available across Africa. So we want to do the same thing with the private sector on fertilizer, where we're going to work with the Africa Fertilizer Agribusiness Partnership, AFAP, in collaboration with our partners to make sure that to increase the production of fertilizer in Africa in terms of production and movement across Africa. The harmonization component has to be done so that there is no disruptions. Then also we want to do the same. Recently we've partnered with FCDO and BMGF in making sure that the horticultural industry which has been stagnating at about 4 billion in the last 10 years or so. We want to grow it by making sure that the value chains of which we have selected of avocado, onions, and Irish potatoes are supported, which will also include the harmonization component, so that in the next 5 years, there is no reason why the horticultural sector should be stagnating, should be 2-3% of a global. So we with our partners, we are happy that we'll make a difference in the next 5 years by making sure that through Actesa interventions, the sector will grow, and we will make sure within ourselves, we are going to use standards that are global, trade among ourselves, excess we can export anywhere in the world, because we've harmonized those standards according to global standards. And I think this will be key in making sure that we are food secure. We are not importing $40 billion of food every year, which have been told that this will increase to 100 billion if we don't do anything about it, which will be unfortunately because most of our countries, we deal with primary commodities, and for us to enhance the value chains that are being talked about, the issues of we need to make sure that our agriculture sector is properly supported, and my institution of Actesa, I think, is going to make a contribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There you are. We've heard for ourselves what the panelists are doing to contribute to the Malabo commitments. At this point, I would like to invite comments, mostly comments, on how we can do things better from the audience, clarifications, rarely questions. Please, the floor is open. We only have, at this point, 18 minutes. Okay, so we'll start with the gentleman over there. Yeah.
Okay, good. My name is Henry Roberts. I'm from Liberia. I'm one of the ECOWAS regional expert, and I'm also president of the ECOWAS Arab Non-State Actors Coalition. To be honest with you, today was the first time I heard of ATSO. A few weeks ago, ECOWAS, when you said held a meeting in Liberia on SBS in relationship to AFTA. I didn't hear about AFTA then. Now, in the list, there are many countries who have now responded to AFTA or are not involved, including my own country. Is it because these countries are overwhelmed with all these different standards? Is it a reason why they are not responding? Shouldn't we? The next question is: we have a $50 billion food inputs bill. Are the foods that are coming into our continent, we have to meet actual standards? My last question: has the WTO accepted ASO standards? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'll ask Nadine to quickly respond to that on the issue of ASO. Very quickly.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to hear that Liberia is here with us. Liberia is one of our member states, one out of the 43 that we have. And we have been also working with ECOWAS closely because we have a memorandum of understanding. And even ECOWAS is using ECOSHAM, a ECOWAS standard harmonization model, which was aligned with the African standard harmonization model. We should continuously create awareness, even internally in our institute. Office and with other offices so that we have we talk the same language, if I can say. And I hope that today, from today on, you are now going to spread the news within the ECOWAS. So the standards that are harmonized at the ECOWAS, some are adopted. For the ECOWAS, for COMESA, we know very well that their standards are adopted from us. So that one we are sure, except that the standards that are particular for ECOWAS, and we are aiming at developing or harmonizing them at ARSO. So for the ECOWAS, what we need to go through again is creating awareness, more awareness. For Liberia, what I can say, does not participate in so many technical committees, but Nigeria is represented in the COCOA meeting, the COCOA committee, sorry, the COCOA committee. They contribute a lot in that. They started 2019 participating in the COCOA committee. They participate in the automotive. They participate in almost six technical committees. So I think we should work with Liberia and also with other countries to spread the good news in
Thank you. Sir, they are next to Nadine. Dr. Sunday.
Thank you very much. Sunday from Nigeria. The information is in 2 areas. The first is whether AFTA has got volumes and volumes of commodities being traded at this point in time. Because for producers, when they want to access markets, they want to see it. They want to see the demand and know where to move their commodities to. Has AFTA started collecting data on the actual commodities and the volumes that is being demanded? I mean, that is in demand in different parts of Africa, so that the producers can know exactly how much to produce and where to take it to. Secondly, coming to standards, my people in Southern Kaduna have just lost about $10 million of their produce of ginger. Their farms were infected with fungus this last season. So they lost all the ginger. And the ginger from that location happens to be the best in the whole world. If you doubt it, you Google it. You will know that it is the best, followed by India. And it's the best because of the nature of the soil. The soil is special. Even the chili pepper, the tomatoes, the okra that is grown in those areas with the ginger happen to be the best for the food industries globally. The question is, with the fungal infection that has made the farmers to lose the whole crop this year, what is the response strategy that is working backwards? Instead of checking for standards, what about farmers that have suffered from some kind of infection or whatever? How do we get them to recover? Right now, they've lost money. And, there's no evidence that anybody is mobilizing scientists to go and check what kind of fungus has eroded the whole farms. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Kefilwe, would you like to take the first one? It's not my question. It's not a question, you don't. Okay. So may I remind the audience that summarize your questions. 30 seconds to ask a question. Please. Sir, over there. And when you're asking, move closer to the mic so that you don't spend time looking for a functioning microphone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the presentations and perspectives shared so far. My name is Azubike Nwokoye. I work for Action Aid Nigeria. We are part of the Cardiff Non-State Actors group. One thing we would like to find out is with AFCTA and issues of SPS, how do we, because from conversations over the days, it has not really been coming out clearly, how do we deal with the issues of highly hazardous pesticides in Africa? Highly hazardous pesticides in Africa. The statistics are looking so bad, and it's about nutrition and food safety and about market access, both within Africa and outside Africa. We are losing billions of dollars as Africa. What drastic steps do we need to take? Thank you.
Ma'am, over there. Yes, please. Yes.
Oh, was it me?
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Fililo Nambe from World Food Program based here in Lusaka, Zambia. I was very happy with the progress that we have made around these standards, especially to ensure food safety. But my concern is around that food, once it is considered safe with the standards that are there, what about the utilization? So this comment is coming in the face of the rise in unhealthy diets that are available. And now we know that most of the food that we produce is actually not as healthy as it should be, especially once it is passed through the processing stage. So I'm wondering, should we that can define healthy and nutritious foods so that we can curb or start already to reduce the anticipated rise in maybe non-communicable diseases related to unhealthy diets. So the question is, should we now start to consider standards in that particular aspect? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think the last question we'll take from Dr. Liz. Under 1 minute.
Can I speak? I'm Lisa Corsten from South Africa, and I'm also the president of the African Academy of Science. So we are looking at particularly capacity building in Africa, and that takes me to a very important component of this discussion today, and that is the food safety competency and capacities within the continent. And that's your technical capacity, your regulators, your food safety researchers, and then also your supportive structures to train and support your risk assessors and building that technical competency within government, but also within industry. So it's a very the diagnostic frameworks around that, and almost enabling laboratories in Africa to link and to form a platform to share data, and then that fits in with the laboratory accreditation models and frameworks. And it goes beyond just the aflatoxin and rightly the pesticide regulatory frameworks, but also your zoonotic groups and antimicrobial resistance, all of these other hazards, that's the emerging and re-emerging pathogens. So, and the access to data and the technical competence in the continent unpacking. And then finally, I just want to comment and say this has been a wonderful session. And thank you very much for the initiative for putting food safety squarely in the middle of the table. It is an important aspect of SPS, very important in terms of food security and One Health. So I want to commend you on all your efforts and just thank all the speakers.
Who would like to go first? Very quickly.
Yeah, I think from Actesa point of view, there was somebody from Nigeria was asking about hazardous pesticides. I think what we can recommend nowadays is the use of biopesticides or bioprotectants, to control aflatoxins and other diseases. I think a combination of that with good agricultural practice, I think will make the produce coming from smaller farmers. For example, in COMESA, we have about almost 80 million smallholder farmers. So if they can use environmental friendly methods, biocontrol agents, biopesticides, bioprotectants, and good agricultural practice, I think that will make their produce, to be accessed regionally and globally. Thank you.
Dr. Hakim, anything?
Thank you very much. Quick feedback regarding the question on the commodities and the statistics. I believe the representative from the FCTA listed the commodities that are actually currently traded within the guided trade initiative. So we can actually already see that coffee, tea, honey, and the rest of the commodities are already traded there, and we can actually be able to share the statistics. The other question regarding food safety issues as well as the competencies, I think the food safety strategy for Africa has a very firm strategy on risk assessment as well as infrastructure and related aspects. And I believe that will actually be covered substantially as we effectively implement the food safety strategy for Africa. Finally, the feedback for a standard for healthy diets, interesting proposition. That is something that we can actually be able to look into as we go into the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just to respond to the question on the SCDs, that indeed is important that we do have food labeling labels in place, because that's where the consumers can actually read and understand how to actually store their food safely to avoid contamination at household level as well. And I'll come back to the point that I mentioned at the beginning that if you don't actually strengthen our food safety or food traceability systems in place, then Africa becomes a dumping ground. We should ensure that we have stringent food standards in place. And as well as the consumer mentioned, we should ensure that consumers are not left behind. The standards on healthy diets and nutrition, this is something that some of the coalition that has the outcome of the food system is actually working on. There's a coalition on healthy diets, and they're working on some standards that to strengthen the nutrition component as part of the food safety. And lastly, trade cannot be done without nutrition. We need to ensure that as we trade through nutrition lens. Thank you.
Quickly.
Thank you very much. Just on some of the questions and comments very quickly. So first of all, standards are part of the solution. They are not silver bullet. So I think we have to look at them in that systems thinking. The other thing is, I think the way forward is evidence-based, science-based standards. So whether it is pesticide residues or hazardous pesticides or other food safety risks, the way forward is evidence-based and science-based standards. This can also, by the way, not only contaminants, but also microbial hazards, as Prof said. And I think on access to data, we had a challenge on availability as well as sharing of data in the continent. So the food safety data hubs that I tried to highlight might have some answers to that, but it's not an easy thing to do. Thank you.
Finally, please, 30 seconds.
Last but not least, 30 seconds, just to comment on the capacity from the lady from South Africa and infrastructure. I think one is at the smallholder level where you have to create that capacity, which is through awareness and incentives for them to understand about food safety. Secondly, at the other level, which is those aggregators and the processors, we found out that there has been improved investment in improve some of the sharing of the data plus use of infrastructure. That's what I can comment what we've seen, but there are a lot of lessons that have to be learned. Thank you.
Dear delegates, we hate for ourselves. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Food safety, because I think the interest is very high, but the time is very limited. Thank you again. This comes bring us to the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's appreciate this panel. Thank you. Thank you, Doreen, and your panelists, and also for keeping time. Please, let's be seated here at 11:45. So make your way earlier so that by 11:45 we are seated. That gives you about 40 minutes of break. So please, you can't be late. Okay, enjoy your tea break. Thank you very much.
something like that. So I just have to put that.